This week's episode of the Wild Card Podcast is brought to you by all of the things that have taken place since last week's episode of the Wild Card Podcast. Guys, I'm so pleased that our president has finally secured our truce with Botswana.
Oh, thank God for that.
Unfortunately, the earthquake in California has splittered it into 3 independent countries floating out of the Pacific.
It's really unfortunate.
No, what gets me the most is I'm so excited about the sequel to Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, which was the movie that made Stallone's 1980s career.
Well, I saw the new trailer at Comic-Con.
I love that movie.
Did you guys hear about this new Amazon product? It's called Outhouse Go. True portable potties. A drone delivers a toilet anywhere you need it. You get the app, and you shit where you sit.
Wow, I'm kind of wanting that right this minute. Have you guys heard about the recent silver boom in Crede, Colorado, making it no longer a backwater, but there's almost 1 million people living there. They're building skyscrapers,
Good for you, Crede.
50 stories high, rivaling the height of the mountains.
I don't know. Call me gluttonous. I'm most excited about Taco Bell's new dripping pork empanada with a nacho cheese filling and then a Doritos crust.
Oh, right on the outside, just kind of...
Oh, God, it's so good.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah. Brand new. It just came out today.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Guys, I think we nailed these predictions. There's no way they'll know we recorded this in advance.
No, I think you're right. I'm going to be on vacation, so I don't give a damn what they think anyway.
Guys, the mic is still running.
Oh, God. Quickly, turn it
Turn
on!
it off, Jeff, please.
Welcome to the Wild Card Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Eaton, and my co-pilots on this journey to wherever are my good friends Jeff Curtis.
Hello.
And it is a dimension as vast as space, and as timeless as infinity. It's the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call Ron Blair.
Oh my God, that's spectacular.
Thank you.
What a Twilight Zone-y
exactly.
introduction. What a nickname.
I feel like even though it was completely a Twilight Zone introduction, it still kind of fit you, I thought.
No, I think it totally fit me.
It totally.
The
vast dimension, especially.
My favorite was lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge.
That was my favorite.
You're halfway between fear and knowledge.
Yeah, that's where I live.
People are afraid of knowing you.
I'm the ogre. I'm the ogre that lives there. Yes.
All right, Ogre. Will you tell the sweet, sweet deckheads what this podcast is all about?
This podcast is all about haunting your dreams with our relentless education and the unblinking terror of bad jokes and endless yammering and jackrolling. It's about torturing your ear holes and brain mush with our tomfoolery, shenanigans, whatnots, and goings-on.
I think we just need to use that every week. Because that is the most
That's actually the most accurate one.
The most accurate one you've ever given.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Well done, sir.
That
you just wrote that on a smoke break.
That should be in our Facebook show description.
I think we may have to use that because I like that a lot.
Endlessly yammering on. I like
All right,
that.
guys.
I like brain mush and ear holes.
Yeah, well, we use ear holes a lot.
Yes,
so I've used
I like ear holes.
That's because we're talking to our listeners' ear holes.
That's right.
That's all we
know.
This is an unfortunate Jared-isode. And I don't know how long it's going to take because my report is 22 pages long.
Holy,
that's almost a Jeff-isode, Jared.
Those are
I'm only planning on listening to 3 pages. That was my rule when I came in.
A normal Jared-isode is like 12 to 14 pages.
Right. Oh my God.
So there's a lot here.
A short Jeff-isode is 22 pages.
Right, exactly.
And he realizes that Ron and I are talking too much, so he skips 4 of them.
Oh yeah.
So I hope you guys have a lot to say during this episode today. I'm hoping it's not just me yammering, because that'll be horribly boring.
Yammering. But I may jackroll.
I'm
in a jackrolling mood.
I'm glad to hear that, because I want to be jackrolled at least thrice during
this.
Thrice?
I got thrice in me.
You got thrice jackrolls in you?
But because I know this topic could take a while,
in me.
I picked a shorter favorite section. A favorite question. And it's probably the favorites question that is the most common favorites question of all time.
Yeah.
What's your guys' favorite color?
Oh.
And why?
Okay.
Well, maybe as a kid, has it changed since you were an adult?
Yes. When I was a kid, it was blue because it's a nice, cool color and it's relaxing and it.
Blue was my favorite color when I was young as well.
I always like the chill colors rather than the warm colors, the red and the yellows, and the ones that say attention, look at me as I wear this red shirt, which was clean. You're welcome.
Yeah.
They can smell.
First time ever.
Right. Exactly.
By the time this podcast has come out, smell-o-vision has been mastered.
I thought I can't wear yesterday's t-shirt again because I had worn it to work yesterday and then immediately started doing the 48-hour film fest.
I've done that before.
Slept in those clothes for 2 hours between Friday and Saturday and then worked all day in it. and I'm on set Saturday, and I smell myself, and it's like 9 o'clock. We'd been going at it for 2 hours, and I thought, this is unacceptable. This is an unacceptable odor for these people to have to
Sometimes I'll
smell.
go out and I'll be like shopping or something in a day when I'm not doing much,
Yeah.
and I'll be wearing a shirt for an hour at most, because I'll go
Right.
home and I'll take my shirt off because I'm home by myself and
Right.
I don't need to wear a shirt.
Sure.
And then I'll be like, someone saw me in that shirt. I can't. I can't wear it again. But when I was a kid, blue was my favorite color as well, because
Yeah.
my dad was a big UK fan, so we had a blue,
Yeah.
all blue in the house, and my eyes are blue, so blue is kind of my favorite as a kid. What about you, Jeff? Do you have a favorite color as a kid?
Blue was my favorite then. It's my favorite now. But it's not every blue. There's blues that
Sure.
I can't stand, like royal blue.
there-
Don't give me royal blue.
No, I don't like royal blue. I don't like pastel blue either.
No, I like complex blues.
Yeah, I like an electric
Kind of
blue.
grayish
That's what I
blues.
like.
I like gray
Blue
blues.
I like gray blue.
You like
enough. I like
blue-
electric.
boogaloo?
I like boogaloo too.
Electric
the
boogaloo.
boogalooing.
Back off,
Yeah.
Boogaloo. Back off.
Back off, boogaloo.
So I
That's
was
my
the
favorite
kind of
sequel
kid who
ever.
didn't want my favorites to be the same as everyone else's favorites.
Right.
And I realized that blue was the boy color. And I don't know exactly what it was about middle school, like teenage angst, that brought this about, but blue stopped being my favorite color. And the color I'm currently wearing became my favorite color.
Gray.
Gray.
Gray is now
Gray.
my favorite color. And it's been my favorite color since junior high.
Yeah.
And in junior high, I pretty much only wore like gray, black, and white. I wanted to be as nondescript as possible and as forgettable
Right.
in what I wore. Because I didn't want to be like wear a shirt that I loved and someone be like, didn't you just wear that the other day?
Right.
So I picked something super neutral. And so that was why it was my favorite color then. But then as I grew older, I'm like, man, that's a sharp color.
Yeah.
Like a dark gray, like kind of the one I'm wearing. This is my favorite shirt I own right
Right.
now. I like this dark gray. My dad had a dark gray car that I really liked. I just like a slate or gunmetal sometimes.
Right.
Big fan of that. Black as well. I wore an all black suit yesterday.
I like black. I like black clothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily my favorite color or lack of color. Purple's my favorite to look at now.
Yeah.
It's a lovely royal color, and I like purple and black together. It's strictly with aesthetics. I like the color purple. The actual color, not the
I'm
film.
attracted
But the
to
film
it
is fine.
because when I was in college, that was our color.
Yeah.
The Evansville Purple Aces.
Yeah.
And I thought it was super weird then. Our colors were purple and white and orange.
Oh.
And it was weird. And now that I'm older, like 2 years ago, I bought Evansville Polo because I didn't know anything from my college. Because I don't
Right.
know why. I don't really know why I was trying to distance myself from it. Like I don't have any
Yeah.
negative feelings about it. It's just something I'm not really.
Well, maybe it wasn't intentional.
I don't really advertise.
Right.
And then I'm like, you know what? I want an Evansville shirt. So I bought an Evansville purple polo with purple and white. And I love that thing. It's so comfortable. And I love wearing it. And I never had worn purple before that, really.
I don't look good. I like the color purple, but I can't wear purple. I washes me out. My face gets all white, and most people don't actually look good in purple. Purple's one of those colors that
It's
looks
not
really
worn well.
It
Yeah.
looks really good on certain people,
Like the Joker.
Like the joke. Well, that's a very different purple, too.
but on most people, it's not a color that goes well with human
No.
flesh.
You're wearing,
you don't wear
you're
it
wearing
well,
a green
yeah.
right now, a dark green.
Yeah.
It's a good Jeff color.
It is a good Jeff color.
And I like wearing that color as well. I like green, dark greens, or even light greens. It's
I don't think green's my color.
it's just comfortable.
I've got a
No, you're not so
a
much
bright
a green.
polo, which is unusual. I don't usually wear bright colors like that a lot.
Yeah.
But I think reds, my colors I've always been, and then blues. People like when
Yeah.
I wear blue because they said my eyes come out, they pop out of my head.
Yeah, electric blue.
they
They've
take
said that
them- they
about
take
me.
them home.
Yeah,
They
and they
take my
take them
eyes.
home. They look at them. They
keep them.
polish them.
Your eyes?
They keep
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, I
keep
don't know
on
why,
their mantle.
I don't know why it makes me uncomfortable when people say something about that. They're like, "Oh, your eyes really popped today." I'm like, "That sounds painful. I don't want that to happen. I'm gonna put them back in real fast."
That's a good
Oh,
idea.
I could go so far with eyes and just gross people out, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh, I almost want you to.
Yeah,
It's audio. I don't think it works quite as well.
It'll just lead to what happened to my eye when I was 12, and
When we start the Wild Card Vodcast.
Yeah, no,
When we start
it's
the
not a
Wild Card
fun story.
Vodcast, we'll do that.
The vodcast?
The
Is that what-
vodcast.
The
Yeah.
vodcast?
When we
Oh, the video
yeah.
podcast,
When
yeah.
we start a vodcast.
I thought we were going to be drinking
Well,
vodka.
Absolutely. It's a double.
The thing is,
entendre.
ever since I learned how you lost that eye, I've pictured it, and it horrifies me because the eyes are so sensitive.
Well, and
the
that's-
pain that you must have felt at that point,
I've
I can't even
never
imagine.
had a
I
problem with
can't-
needles. Maybe when I was really, really young. But
Yeah.
I've been giving blood for a decade,
Yeah.
longer than a decade. So like needles, I'm fine with. But I could never wear contacts. I wouldn't be able to do it. Like I'd
have
can't
trouble with
I
that,
can't
too.
put eye drops in. I have to go sideways and blink it down my eye, like put it in my eyelashes and blink it down my eye because I can't put it
Until
on
it gets through. So
without-
you have to put in more drops so that it'll
Absolutely.
get through.
Oh, I get a river streaming through there because
Yeah.
I'm so sensitive in my eyes.
I don't like
and
having
like
my
I like
eyes-
glasses. I think I'll probably be wearing glasses in the next couple of years
Yeah.
because my vision's starting to get a little worse. But I just am so sensitive with my eyes that I'm kind of the same way about like, no, I don't.
Yeah, I couldn't do contacts, and I don't like my ears being messed with either. I've got a real issue with my ears.
You don't want me to be giving you this what Willie I'm getting ready to give you?
No! No, I don't want my ears touched or even looked at, really. So everybody,
I'm looking at your ear right now.
Everybody avert your gaze.
Your ears are absolutely
So
fine.
you're wanting our
There's
podcast
nothing wrong with them at
to
all.
stop looking at your ears?
Please, people, please, listeners, stop looking at my ear holes.
I think of the ears, mine are the weirdest of the three. Because my
head, your ears are normal.
my head
Tiny
is
little,
huge.
they're tiny.
They are
My
tiny ears
Tiny
compared to your
little-
head.
Yes, Mr.
It looks like
Potato
they're
Head.
shrunken.
That's true. When I look at your ears compared to Ron's, they're like half the size.
My head's
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
big, my head's
Tiny
as
little
big,
ears.
if not bigger than Ron's, and my ears are small.
Yeah, your ears make me give the illusion though that your head's smaller.
Well, that's nice.
I was always
Yeah.
surprised that you and I were the same hat size because I wear
Right.
You are
my
a
head's
bigger
so
man than
big
you are a
that
bigger
I
man
can't
than
find
I am.
hats.
Yeah.
And our sizes are not the same except for the head size.
But
I'm
when I look at your ears, I think your head's smaller. I think it's like a medium,
tiny.
but it's
Excellent.
not.
No.
If they came to a point, they would be very elfy ears.
Elven?
You could have elven ears.
All right.
Yeah.
An Elven Ranger.
You could be an elven ranger.
And the thing is, my ears are small, but my
great.
hearing is great.
Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
why.
that's because the size of your ear actually has nothing to do with
well,
how
and the
your
outer ear
Right.
does help capture sound, but it's my sense of smell is worthless.
Right. So
especially
your,
so
so
now,
your
so-
other sense.
My eyes are failing, so
better.
luckily my hearing.
I feel like I would have good hearing if not for tinnitus. 100% of the time.
Tinnitus.
Is it tinnitus?
Tinnitus?
I've heard
Itis.
online
Itis
they
is,
started saying tinnitus, and I said, "Oh, I've been pronouncing it wrong all this time."
itis means inflammation of.
Well, that's what I thought, and I had
tinnitus,
pronounced it that way for years. But yeah,
I
I
mean,
do have a
tinnitus sounds good.
from
We're gonna go play some tennis after this on the courts.
right. As a child, I remember having this
Maybe,
and
and again,
hearing
I'm
the
not,
ringing in my
I'm not
ears
a doctor,
always.
so maybe
my
that's
whole
how
life.
doctors say it, but it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know. In all the YouTube videos, I was like, "Oh, I've been wrong all these."
Because
I don't make you-
YouTubers know what they're
Ron,
talking
it's like
about.
no,
I
it's
need
not
you to
just
recall,
YouTube.
Ron.
No, it's
Ron,
not these
we're,
normal
we're
morons.
on YouTube.
It's the better morons.
We're on YouTube, so obviously.
Well, that's true.
All right, guys, question for you.
Yeah.
What was my last episode about?
Scary stuff.
No,
wait.
my last episode.
Oh, the stand.
The
The
Stand.
stand. Okay, it wasn't eugenics. That's where I keep thinking.
No, but
let's do it
we were
since-
talking Holocaust, so it was
Yeah.
it was scary stuff,
Yeah.
Jared. I stand by my earlier.
I say
It was-
that's why I said my last episode.
I love
My
the
last episode was
apocalypse.
the
Not
Stand
the real one.
And the apocalypse. And what caused the apocalypse in the Stand?
Disease, virus.
That's what we're talking.
Stephen King.
That's what we're talking about. It's true.
Stephen King caused the whole
We are
thing. We're talking
talking
about
about
viruses
diseases
today.
today.
We're talking
Oh.
about diseases.
And
Oh, good! Another happy
Another
podcast.
uplifting
So,
podcast.
but
yeah.
here's the thing: when I was starting this podcast, I already knew the name of the episode.
Oh.
Wild cards go viral.
Oh,
Okay,
How
well,
good a name
there
is
we go.
that?
That's a great name.
works.
Okay,
It works on so many
Here's
levels.
question number 2.
Yeah.
What health concerns do you have?
all,
What are you
all of the
concerned
above.
Oh, you mean as far as viruses going,
In general,
or just
what
in
health
general?
concerns-
When you're
have?
over a certain age, everything is cancer. Every stomach ache, every headache, it's all cancer.
I'm not worried about cancer. I'm worried about. Well, I keep thinking I'm going to be blind by the time I'm 60, so I won't be able to see.
So that's a concern. That's a legitimate concern.
Although to be honest, my left eye has had the same prescription for the last 15 or 20 years
Well, you're
since I
probably
started.
doing okay.
Since I started wearing contacts. Before
Yeah.
when I wore glasses, my eyesight got worse every single year. And now when I don't wear glasses or my contact, I can't see worth crap.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a concern. My biggest health concern is my bowels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they don't work the way I would like them to work. Sometimes they're fine. Usually there's either too much movement or not enough movement.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would like to have control of that, but I don't see it getting any better as I'm getting older. That, my knees,
is
my
there any
feet.
is there any correlation that's been drawn between processed foods, the
Like
the
preserved,
advent
things like that,
of
preservation?
processed foods and dietary issues having escalated due to that?
I mean, I would say there's very little causative evidence of much of anything. Now, I'm sure there have been some specific preservatives that were like, oh crap, that was a bad idea.
Right.
I don't have anything in my head right now. But what I want to impress, because we're going to talk about disease a lot today, and that can be a very scary topic for a lot of people. If you look at the last 100 years, 100, 250 years, you know, that range, life expectancy has shot up.
Yeah.
So while we're going to be talking about things that can kill you, I want to remind you, people are living longer.
Right.
So that is, you know, keep that in the back of your mind throughout all of this today. But next question for you guys. What diseases do you believe are the most frightening?
Well, cancer, of course.
Okay. So I've got a top 10 list, according to the World Health Organizations, of diseases that kill.
All right.
And this is by the number of deaths per year. Cancer is not in the top 10.
Really?
Now, cancer as a whole would be.
There's lots of different kinds.
But there's so many different
things are
types
being
of
broken
cancer.
down.
Right. And what I would say is, if I was to ask my students, or if I'd asked you 3 or 4 years ago what disease is most frightening, the first thing that would pop out of your mouth would have been Ebola.
Yeah.
Because it was scary.
Well, there's always a disease of the
I
year,
wasn't
it
afraid of
seems.
Ebola because I knew I wasn't going to be
my
in
kids-
contact with it.
I got asked about it 3 times a day. Kids were terrified because
Well, there's sensationalism now of these
exactly.
diseases. They didn't used to do that. AIDS was really, they started sensationalizing it, and it was something horrifying that you would want to be careful of and watch out for.
Until they learned how it was transmitted.
Right.
Yeah.
But the sensationalism of that disease, and they haven't stopped.
But it was partly because, well, A, there was no cure.
right.
There still isn't.
And
And it's
there's
more,
still
it's
isn't.
more
No cure for that.
manageable. It's more manageable.
Right.
But B, it was connected with the homosexual community so much
Right.
that, you know, that
Which was
just
so
freaked
taboo.
people out
Right.
as well because it was taboo. Exactly.
Right.
All right, so number 1
Yeah.
on the World Health Organization list of diseases is coronary artery disease.
The heart disease, right?
Essentially.
Yeah.
Also called ischemic heart disease.
Yeah.
8.8 million deaths in 2015.
Yeah.
It is the deadliest disease in the world. It accounts for just under 16% of all deaths worldwide.
Yeah.
It occurs when blood vessels that supply blood to the heart become narrowed. And this can be because of blockage due to diet, cholesterol, lack of exercise. There are all
I'm
these
gonna
things
go.
I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah.
No.
It may take me, but I'm expecting to live a long life. I'm not afraid of any of these diseases.
There you go.
Well, that's a good way to be. I expect all of them last week.
Yeah.
I have a bit of hypochondria,
Oh, yeah,
but
you
I
do.
don't like going to the doctor.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged
So
sword.
you're not Munchausen's. You're not like,
No.
I want to be treated for this to feel special. You're just like worried about it.
No, that's it. That's it. I've seen so much disease that I'm like, I'm going to get that. Of course I'm going to get that. It makes sense.
Untreated coronary
it's
artery
weird.
disease can lead to chest pain, heart failure, and arrhythmias.
Right? Which I'm having all of right now.
At this very
At
moment.
this moment.
Although it's still the leading cause of death, mortality rates have declined in many European countries and in the United States.
Well.
This may be due to better public health education, access to health care, and forms of prevention.
Sure.
However, in many
Makes
developing
sense.
nations, mortality
Oh, yeah.
rates of CAD are on the rise. An increasing lifespan, socioeconomic changes, and lifestyle risk factors play a role in this rise.
Yep.
So, in certain places, it's going down because of awareness, and there are prevention steps you can do that won't necessarily make it stop, but can help delay at least.
Yeah.
Right.
But other countries where there are new things that are coming around, it's more common there.
Well, let me stop you right there.
Okay,
Already?
I want to be stopped.
Because I found a moment.
Okay.
I did my yearly health assessment through work earlier this week.
Yeah, you and I talked about that.
Yeah. And I may have mentioned this where the nurse was sitting there and she's going, your triglycerides are high, your cholesterol's good, but you need more good cholesterol. I'm not
Low
at
density
high risk
lipoprotein
outside of
versus
like
high
blood
density
pressure.
lipoproteins.
I've had high blood pressure for years and whatnot, and that was no surprise. But then she's going, you need to eat more avocado, more oatmeal, more fibers. And I'm going,
Fiber is
all
important.
I eat is fiber. Like I'm eating avocado almost daily. And she's going, you need to eat this kind of stuff daily. I eat oatmeal every single day. And I'm going, what more do you want
would
from me,
say-
lady, that I'm not eating? I'm eating everything you're telling me
From a
to
dietetics
eat.
perspective, I'm not a teacher who's like, don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat this,
Right.
don't eat this. I don't care about different types of fad diets.
Right.
No, the good thing about a diet is it makes you focus on what you're eating, not so
Yeah.
much that what it is. Like there are diets that have gone on low carb diets. There's a high fat diet right now.
Right,
It's
I've heard
really
about this,
popular,
yeah.
and I've heard good things about it.
Yeah.
But again, it's just focusing on what you're eating and what you're not eating. Fiber is one of the things that I usually recommend most highly because few people get enough of it.
Right.
You should have a bowel movement every day for each meal you have.
Yeah.
That's 3 for most people.
And it seems like a lot. I don't have 3 a day.
Right.
I don't.
And because, every so many hours after you eat, you should be getting rid of that if
Right.
your bowels are working the way they're supposed to.
Right.
Sometimes I don't have a bowel movement for 3 days.
Wow.
That's
that is very
terrifying.
unhealthy.
That's awful.
That's like if you're...
No,
imagine
If they
I
don't
do
have a
at
bowel
least
movement
once
all
a day.
day long.
Yeah,
I
imagine if your
no,
sink or
I-
toilet didn't drain for 3 days.
Oh, I know.
Right,
That's
right.
that's what's into it, which is why
God.
fiber
I'm
is
sorry,
so
man.
important.
I hate
Yeah.
it for you.
No, thanks.
I don't go through it, but my day's coming, I'm sure.
Hope not.
a lot of pork.
I don't wish it on anybody.
Yeah.
No, it sounds horrible. I do eat a great deal of fiber.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I recommend. All right, so number 2 is stroke.
I'm not afraid of it.
6.2
You're afraid of nothing. This man fears
million
nothing.
deaths in 2015. So 2 million fewer, but still. A stroke occurs when an artery in your brain is blocked or leaked. So it's same type of
It's a heart attack, but
artery
with the
problem.
brain,
Right,
right.
heart attack in the brain. This causes the oxygen-deprived brain cells to begin dying within minutes.
Right.
During a stroke, you feel sudden numbness and confusion or have trouble walking and seeing. If left untreated, a stroke can cause long-term disability.
Yeah.
In addition to causing approximately 11% of all deaths worldwide, strokes are the leading cause of long-term disabilities.
Yeah, but when we're talking something like stroke, is it something that you can actually prevent?
If
By
you are
worrying
doing-
about it? Or
No. You can't prevent it by worrying about it.
Stress, if anything, is worse.
Right.
But again, if what is causing your arteries to become narrow is due to diet or lifestyle, then yes, there
Well,
is
that's the
something
thing.
to
It's
do.
smoking and high cholesterol.
High cholesterol,
Stuff like that. Same thing as a heart attack.
Okay.
The exact same.
Yeah, there are a lot of those things
stressors
that
and
can,
cause
that can lead to your
causations.
atherosclerosis. Well,
Right.
that's actually hardening of arteries, but like a tightening of the arteries.
Right.
People who receive treatments within 3 hours of having a stroke are significantly less likely to have disabilities.
I've heard this, and I've heard the same about heart attacks. If you get care within the first 5 minutes of a heart attack, your chances go up
Again,
enormously.
even just aspirin.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It all is how quick. You know, my grandmother had a stroke at one point, and she got help right away. And it helped, but she was never the same after the stroke
Well,
as she was
No, that
before.
happens with a lot of folks. I've seen a lot of
Any
stroke
sort
victims
of-
in my family
anything
that
that
have not
occurs in
been
the
right
brain
after. Yeah.
is dangerous because that's where
Yeah.
our memory is, that's where our
Right.
emotional centers are. That's essentially what we are. We are a
Yeah,
brain
right.
in a shell that keeps the brain alive. Every other part of your body's job is to keep the brain alive.
Yeah.
Because that's us, who we are.
Now, I will say I'm afraid of Alzheimer's.
Well, we'll get to that one.
That it's legitimate.
Yeah.
I'm more afraid of losing my mind than dying.
Your body.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
that
mean,
makes
I
sense.
would rather keep my mind and my body and my mind die at the same time than lose my mind and my body stick around for another 10 years.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I get that.
Right.
Number 3, lower respiratory infections. 3.2 million deaths in 2015. And these are things like the flu, pneumonia, bronchitis, tuberculosis.
Well, they suck. When we got the flu during company,
You guys had Captain Trips.
when we got Captain Trips, that was pretty horrible.
I've never been so sick in all my life.
And there were times during it when I wish I was dead,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I wasn't afraid of dying.
Well, I was.
Well, that's the thing about the flu is you don't often think of it being deadly because we have antivirals.
Right.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of countries that don't.
Yeah.
And
Around
if you look
my-
100 years ago, all of those diseases were
Oh,
leading
absolutely.
cause of death.
Around my third day of feeling like I did on the first day, I started getting scared.
Yeah.
I started getting worried because I had never not healed almost immediately after I realized that I'm sick.
Yeah.
And that thing lasted for at least a week with after effects going long after
Yeah,
that.
that was a bad bout. The worst of it was lasted for a week, but then to get past all of the symptoms and all of it, it took like a month or longer, 6
Yeah.
weeks to get out.
It was just the
It was-
worst.
it was
ever.
horrible.
A whole week of just being in a daze and not being there. I stayed awake for maybe 20 minutes at a shot.
Yeah.
Although it was 20 minutes several times a day, that's the most I could do. I would sleep for maybe an hour and then be awake for 20 minutes, sleep for another hour, and for 5 days that lasted.
Viruses usually cause lower respiratory infections. They can also be caused by bacteria. Coughing is the main symptom of these infections. You may also feel breathlessness, wheezing, and a tight feeling in your chest.
Yeah.
And these can lead to breathing failure if untreated.
Yeah.
Number 4, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. 3.1 million deaths in 2015. COPD is a long-term progressive lung
Yeah.
disease that makes breathing difficult. This and emphysema and bronchitis are both types
Right.
of COPD. In 2004, about 64 million people were around the world living with COPD.
Now, how much of that is caused by smoking?
That is the
I would
most
think a lot of it.
significant.
Yeah, a great deal of it.
Because my grandfather smoked 3 packs a day until he got to a point where the doctor said, if you don't stop smoking, you'll be dead in a week.
Yeah.
And he stopped smoking cold turkey, but he had emphysema for the rest
It
of his
doesn't,
life.
it doesn't
Oh, yeah,
change.
yeah, it doesn't
The
go
damage
away.
is not usually reversible.
That's the crazy thing is because I've smoked a pack a day for 20 years, over 20 years now, and I hear these stories about people that smoke 3 packs a day, and I'm going, when did you have the time, and how could you? After a pack, I feel shitty. Like at the end of the day,
It's just chain smoking. It's a constant
oh
thing.
my god, I can't imagine.
Well, you also used to be able to smoke indoors. You also,
Yeah.
you used to be
Well, that's
socially
true, too.
socially
Well-
acceptable. Like you are polite enough that you will often not smoke
Oh,
if you're
yeah,
in my house,
yeah.
you'll smoke
I
outside.
don't want to bother anybody
But if you look
about
20
it.
years ago,
Right,
you smoked
everybody
indoors.
smoked anywhere.
Yeah.
In hospitals,
Yeah.
you could. Not probably
Well, not
over,
20
it was
years
over
ago,
20,
but
30 years ago.
in
you
40
could.
years, you could definitely.
Yeah.
Early
In
1900s,
40 years
yeah,
ago,
early
you absolutely
1900s,
could.
it was
I remember in the
the
70s, you
doctors
still
were
had
smoking
ashtrays. In the
cigarettes.
80s, you still had ashtrays in waiting rooms and stuff like that. But
There is no single thing you can do to improve your health more than stopping smoking.
right.
Now, this isn't me trying to we're not having a
No.
intervention. but just-
You can
Yeah.
say nothing to me that I haven't heard about
Right,
it, and it
exactly.
doesn't change the fact that I have a horrible addiction.
Once
for
you're
20
addicted
years
to something,
cigarettes
it's hard to
because
walk away.
Cigarettes, the first one you pick up, it's the best thing ever. It tastes so good, it feels so good, and you never want to not do it, and it gets in your head.
And also, when you're trying to give up something like smoking, especially, you've got all these physical habits that are connected with it. So if you're trying to stop smoking, your hands are free. It's like
if you don't have something to replace
right.
it with.
If you don't have
That's
something to
exactly
replace it with, and I used to when I was teaching people how to work with people who have developmental disabilities, I would do this training on, they're trying to stop certain kind of behaviors. And I said, well, you can't just tell them to stop. You got to replace it with something.
No, that's it.
And I would use this example of, remember Dennis Weaver, the actor Dennis Weaver? He was in Duel. He drove the car in Duel.
Oh, okay. I've not seen him in much, but I know who you're talking about.
He was on Guns. It wasn't Gunsmoke, but he did westerns.
Rifleman?
And he was the Detective McCloud in the McMillan Wife McCloud,
Okay,
that series stuff. But anyway, I saw him on Johnny Carson when I was in my early teens, and he was talking about how he stopped smoking, and he was only able to do it because every time he sat down and he wanted to pick up a cigarette, he gave his hand something else to do.
Right. Yeah.
And what he did was he taught himself how to tie a knot in a rope by tossing the end of the rope around, bouncing it, and figure out how to turn that into tie a knot with just the one hand, bouncing the rope around.
Yeah.
And by the time he learned how to tie the knot, he had gotten past the cravings of wanting to have a cigarette in his hand. It kept them occupied. So you don't have to bounce a rope around until you can figure out how to tie a knot, but you have to plan what you're going to do so that you can't pick up a cigarette at the same time, so that your body's occupied. And
I hear about people quitting cold turkey, and I can't imagine quitting cold turkey and then sitting in front of a TV and not going, God, I want a cigarette.
Exactly.
Right now,
So it's not just giving up smoking. You have to change your lifestyle
absolutely.
To a much lesser extent. And again, this is almost silly to mention, but I bite my fingernails.
Yeah.
And it's something that usually I notice I'm doing it. Sometimes I don't.
Right.
I've found one way for me not to do it, and it's to have a toothpick in my mouth. Or like a sucker stick.
Something, a replacement.
Yeah, for my I guess
Oral fixation. Oral
exactly.
fixation.
And if I do that, then I won't bite my fingernails. But then I'm the dude walking around with a toothpick in his mouth.
Right. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be Cobra from 1985.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, you probably do. You want to be Sylvester
Number
Stallone.
5.
I think that was a match.
I made a mistake earlier when I was telling you. I forgot about this one. Number 5.
God damn.
Trachea, bronchus, and lung cancers. So there is one on the list, lung cancer. 1.7 million, but it's a significant drop off. Number 4 was 3.1 million deaths. This is 1.7 million deaths in 2015.
Yeah.
Respiratory cancers include cancers of the trachea, larynx, bronchus, and lungs. Your bronchi are the tubes that go into your lungs from the breathing tube. The main causes are smoking, secondhand smoke, and environmental toxins. But household pollution, such as fuels and mold also contribute.
Yeah.
A 2015 study reports that
I'm
respiratory
going to die
cancer...
of all these. I have all
I'm not going to die of any of these.
All of the above.
I'm not afraid of any of these yet.
In developing countries, respiratory cancer accounts for about 4 million deaths annually. In developing countries, researchers projected 81 to 100% increase in respiratory cancers due to pollution and smoking.
Yeah.
So developing countries.
Well, yeah.
Many Asian countries,
Industrialism doesn't necessarily
especially
make things
India,
better.
still
as
use
health.
coal for cooking. India
still use coal for cooking.
Solid fuel emissions account for 17% of lung cancer deaths in men and 22% in women. So that's pollution.
Yeah. Our reliance on coal is completely unnecessary. 100% unnecessary.
It is now.
It's not required. It's not needed. But the coal industry is so large that they'll continue polluting the earth for an unnecessary
And the
reason.
adjustment to an alternate fuel source is going to be expensive.
Yeah.
It is the right decision, but it's going to cost.
Was the right decision 30 years ago. It should have happened 30, 40 years
It
ago.
started to, and every time a Republican gets into the White House, it stops.
I know. Because who are their main donors? Who do they take money from? The people who fuck us the most.
And here's the problem: is people are thinking you're going to lose jobs, but they're just going to be different. Jobs.
You're just replacing the jobs with different jobs.
And a lot of people are going to be learning it, so it's not like it's going to be a bad thing. But all right, number 6, diabetes mellitus, 1.6 million deaths in 2015. Diabetes is a group of diseases that affect insulin production and use. That's from our pancreas.
Yeah.
In type 1 diabetes, the pancreas cannot produce insulin, and the cause is unknown. Probably genetics of some sort, but not necessarily sure of it. In type 2 diabetes, the pancreas doesn't produce enough insulin, or the insulin is unable to be used effectively by the body.
Right.
Like it's malfunctioning insulin.
Yeah, well, sugar intake has something to do with that, right?
Type 2
Extraordinary
type 2
sugar
diabetes
intake.
can be caused by a number of factors, including poor diet, lack of exercise, and being overweight.
Well, I've got all those, but I'm not getting there.
There you go.
And see, diabetes is the one thing so far that I'm not afraid of at all. My blood sugar is
I have
phenomenal.
I have
an
uncle
outstanding
who
blood sugar level.
just a couple months ago had his foot amputated because it just
That's what would scare me about diabetes if I were concerned about it
He hasn't
because
taken care
of
of his
the
body.
amputations that you hear about.
Now he is in very good spirits about it, but it is
Right.
a reality.
The word necrosis is horrifying.
The death of tissue.
It's awful,
Yes,
yeah.
the death of tissue.
And you hear so many
Your
people
body
with
is dying,
diabetes
yeah.
getting necrosis in certain parts of their body. It's
Tissue damage from
shitty.
the nerves
Yeah.
no longer function.
Oh, it's awful.
Number 7, Alzheimer's disease and other
That's
dementias.
There you go, Jeff.
I'm afraid of that one.
There you go.
1.5 million deaths in 2015. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive disease that destroys memory and interrupts normal mental functions. It is the most common type of dementia. 60 to 80% of dementias are Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
It starts off by causing mild memory problems, difficulty recalling information, and slips in recollection. Over time, the disease progresses and you may not have memory for large periods of time. A 2014 study found that the number of deaths in the United States due to Alzheimer's may be higher than reported because it's the elderly.
Well,
we'll say natural
there are
causes,
several other
they'll say
factors
natural
that
causes
may go
'cause
into
it's
it,
a-
right? Do you do your daily crossword?
Hell no.
I've heard that or Sudoku helps keep.
But
it
I write a
Is that
heck
not
of a
true?
lot of lyrics, so you know.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I always feel like
I hate crosswords, but
I feel like my brain is pretty.
I've
limber.
heard people say that the well, okay, it's okay. Here's you're probably correct. It may be true that these mental stimulations are beneficial in helping keep the brain functioning for elderly and
It's
aging.
exercise. It's
But
exercise for your,
there is no
for your
evidence,
brain muscle.
There is no evidence that like doing these things will increase your brain function or make
Right.
you have a better memory. The studies show that doing crossword puzzles every day, doing Sudokus every day, doing these brain games every day
Right.
only makes you better at those games.
Well, I mean, it maintains the status quo,
Yeah.
though. Maybe
You want-
you don't get
Yeah.
better, but
You want
don't
better memory?
get worse.
You write down notes about what you need to do.
Yeah.
Oh, for God's sake, yeah.
Number
yeah.
8, dehydration due to diarrheal diseases. 1.4 million
Oh,
deaths
yeah.
in 2015.
I always feel like I could take care of that, though. If I had
Because
cholera
we
or diphtheria
are
or
in a
something, I
country
could
that
take
can't
care of
handle it.
Well, yeah, a third world country with
Yeah.
water
And
issues.
that's why
or
there's so many
Flint,
deaths.
Michigan is
Yeah.
not going to be able to handle a
Diarrhea
cholera
is when
outbreak.
you pass 3 or more loose stools in a day. If your diarrhea lasts more than a few days, your body loses too much water and salt. This causes dehydration, which can lead to death.
Right.
Usually caused by an intestinal virus or bacteria transmitted through contaminated water or foods, particularly widespread in developing nations with poor sanitary conditions.
Well, more Americans died in the Civil War from dysentery than from
I-
and
bullets.
World War
I
I.
heard about
Yeah.
that.
And we're
yeah.
going to talk about that later. Number 9 is tuberculosis, which I actually mentioned earlier, but it's also...
Did a whole episode about Waverly
Well, yeah.
Hills.
Well, it was in my number 3, lower respiratory infections, but it's also enough that it gets its own number.
Well,
Yeah, I'm not getting that.
TB is a lung condition
No, I don't
caused
think
by
we're going to get
bacteria
TB.
called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is a treatable airborne virus, although some strains are resistant to conventional treatments.
Yeah.
One of the top causes of death in people who have HIV. Because
Right,
it
the
weakens
immune
system.
deficiencies.
Mhm.
Yeah.
About 35% of HIV-related deaths are due to TB, tuberculosis.
Did you find out how many current cases of tuberculosis there are now?
I do not have that.
Because it has to be tiny compared to what it was 75 years
It's
ago.
definitely much smaller than that number because,
Wow.
again, we have found things that treat it, but as I mentioned in the Wild Card's Head to the Hills,
Yeah.
there are strains that are fighting back.
Yeah, well, there's no cure for TB, is there? Is there a cure? Okay, I was thinking it was something that's manageable,
Yeah,
but
we have,
that
we
you
have
live with it.
antibiotics now that, I mean, you may be susceptible. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
And number 10 is cirrhosis. 1.2
Oh, the
million deaths
drinking
in
disease,
2015.
yes.
It's, well, not necessarily.
What is cirrhosis?
Cirrhosis is
I mean, of the
chronic
liver
or
itself.
long-term damage to the liver.
Yeah.
Scarring to the liver.
Yeah, but alcohol is the number one reason
It is
for
one of
it,
the most
isn't it?
common.
Yeah,
Maybe a result of a kidney disease.
yeah.
Can be caused by hepatitis as well. That
That's another
so
one. Well, you get jaundiced with it. With
hepatitis
the liver
is
not
liver.
working the way
The HEPA
it
refers to
needs
liver, so liver swelling, liver damage,
Right.
and chronic alcoholism as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So basically, Ron's afraid of 8 of these things.
Yeah,
I'm
for the
afraid of
most part.
one. Are you afraid of any of these?
No.
I'm not. Well, you don't.
Not at
You
my
don't
age.
smoke and eat pork either as much as I do.
I will say of these, diabetes is probably most common because it's in my family.
Yeah.
I'm working on my diet. Like
I can see where one would be horrified of diabetes.
I recently cut sodas out of my diet, and not exclusive. Like it's not like I never had a soda, but I've been trying to.
That's because you're beefing up.
I've gone to the gym. I go to the gym
Just
3 days
getting
a
in
week
shape.
now.
That's right.
I'm trying to kind of head these off at the pass
Yeah.
at an age in which hopefully there's something I can do. And not so much that I'm worried about I'm going to get it next week as it is I'm trying to develop a routine that hopefully I can.
Well,
carry
that's
with
the
me.
thing. If you have a routine, then it's easy to keep doing.
I'm worried about when school starts up again, losing the gym, but I hope I don't. All right, so we're done talking about normal diseases now.
Oh, thank
No
goodness.
more,
All right,
no
no-
more normal diseases.
Oh, so
All right.
God, it was getting
Now we get into some esoteric
awful in here.
diseases.
Let's get into some real diseases here. Let's
what
talk about some
are
cool
some of the
stuff.
deadliest diseases in our history?
The plague.
The Black Plague.
That's a big topic we're talking about today. Can you think of any other big outbreaks?
AIDS, the AIDS outbreak of the 80s.
It's true. We're not talking about AIDS today. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks. I'm done.
There was
thanks, Jared.
the Spanish flu
That's the other major one.
that
I've
killed
heard of
more
this, but I
people
don't know
after
anything
World
about
War
it.
One than died in
Yeah.
World War One.
But before we get to those, there are two ways to understand the deadliness of a disease. The first is how many people did it kill?
Right.
And
Well, that
the
makes
bubonic
sense.
plague and the Spanish flu are the big ones there.
Yeah.
They killed a lot of people.
Yeah.
The other way is to talk about something called case fatality rates. That is, if you get the disease, how likely are you to die?
Right.
Right.
And those
Right.
diseases killed a lot of people, but the CFR, case fatality rate, was not as high. You didn't necessarily die if you got it. It's just a lot of people
See, I thought you
got
died
it.
immediately with bubonic plague. I thought
Oh,
if you got
no.
it,
A
you're
lot
done,
of
you're
people
finished.
did,
Yeah.
but not everyone.
Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that people had survived that.
Well, when AIDS came out, it was 100%.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Well, they didn't.
It's still
weren't
high,
aware of
too.
the progression between HIV and turning into AIDS and the prevention of
And the
not
CFR of
prevention
some of these
HIV,
is
but
really
the,
high
how to deal with it, right? The treatment of it,
unless you get treated.
right?
Some of them, if you get treatment, the CFR goes way down. But for an example, rabies. Are either of you afraid of rabies?
No.
No,
Its case fatality rate is about 100%. If you get the symptoms of rabies,
Right, you're gonna
You
die.
die.
Right.
Yeah.
But
If you get bitten and get treated,
exactly,
Right.
the
Well,
symptoms
you're
don't
gonna be
usually
okay.
appear for quite a while after the infection,
Yeah.
and so you have plenty of time to get the vaccine and be fine. But there are fewer than 10 reported cases of people exhibiting symptoms and surviving.
yeah. Well, it makes sense. What it does to your body is horrifying. It's terrifying.
You probably won't recognize the names of many of these other diseases I'm going to mention because they're incredibly uncommon, caused by strange infections, often due to parasites, viruses, or
Are you sure
prions.
Ron didn't go to college with them?
It's
and
true,
shared
yeah.
I actually studied oncology in college. I was an oncology major. That was my specialty when
Yeah.
I went to medical school. So don't fuck with
Have
me,
you heard
man.
of
When you went to medical
Creutzfeldt-Jakob?
When I went to medical school,
Yes.
I was at John Hopkins.
Have you heard of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease?
Yeah.
No. What?
It's a prion disease.
It's when your Creutzfeldt gets infected.
And what's a prion?
A prion is a misfolded protein.
A prion is the
Okay.
thing that infects
A
your
misfolded protein.
Right. Our body is a lot of proteins.
Yes.
Most of them made up of proteins
Right.
and sugars and water.
I'm a
Is
lot
that-
of protein.
But sometimes proteins malfunction. You've heard of mad
Is it
cow
protein?
disease.
It's all protein.
You've heard of
man.
mad cow disease.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a bovine encephalopathy, which is a brain swelling infection that basically kills livestock. Well, Creutzfeldt-Jakob is that in humans. And there are other ones as well. Kuru, I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a Pacific Island disease.
Well, did you? This is
Great.
slightly off topic, but did
Okay.
you know that disease, the encephalitis, mad cow disease, is part of the reason that cannibalism was outlawed in a particular country
yeah.
because they said, okay, if you want to eat people as part of your tradition or whatever, whatever, do not eat the brains.
Absolutely.
They said don't eat the brains because it can
Some of them
lead to
can-
diseases.
Absolutely.
So you can eat the rest of the body, just don't eat
So-
the brains.
That doesn't sound like cannibalism is being outlawed if you're just being told you can't eat the
it's really
brain.
not.
We're
Yeah.
picky about what we eat.
What
in the
country
body.
is this that where it's still legal to?
I cannot remember. It's somewhere in
cannibalism?
Africa. It's somewhere in Africa, and I cannot remember the country.
Some other diseses: African trypanosomiasis,
crazy?
visceral leishmaniasis.
Uh-huh.
Both of those are parasitic diseases.
Ron had those last
Well,
week.
the viral fiction of that, that was my focus. I wrote a term
Great.
paper on that.
Primary amoebic
How many pages was this term
meningoencephalitis
page?
caused by
It was enough.
Guys, I'm saying impressive words. Listen,
I know you are. You are pronouncing them
Which
very
is
well.
why we're talking over it because we.
Right.
I want to try this one again because it's a fun one to say. Primary amoebic meningoencephalitis caused by the bacterium, parasite.
primary amoeba.
Naegleria
Yeah, of
fowleri.
course, of course,
Yeah.
of course.
So then another bacteria. 3 of these
The
are bacteria.
That's with the meningitis. The sister in Pet Cemetery. That's what she had.
Those 3 that I last mentioned are all caused by
you know.
parasites. And then
Okay.
finally, I don't know if you'll know this one or not, but
I'll know it.
fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva.
Oh, where the cells become fibrous. Yes, well,
You
I,
are actually
I want Ron
I
to read
went to
that.
John Hopkins.
Ron, read that word in one of your country accents.
Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva is a genetic disorder.
So that one's not caused by parasites. It is where
It's a genetic disorder.
when your body is damaged,
Yeah.
any tissue in your body is damaged, it ossifies,
Yeah,
which means
or
it becomes
hardens.
bone-like. So your joints start to crust.
Right.
And people
Crusty
with
joints.
Crusty joints.
Well,
Crusty bone is what
people
we call
can be
it.
born with this, and if it is diagnosed early, life expectancy is about 40 years.
Ooh.
If it's not diagnosed early and the child isn't protected,
Yeah.
it can be much less than that. But it's a death sentence.
So I know, I know.
But you're born with crusty bone?
No.
There was a jazz
you
singer
are
we used
born
to,
with
or a
the-
blues singer we used to call Crusty Bone.
Great.
He had this, and he was like 80 years old.
How do you get crusty bone if you're not born
It's a
with
genetic
it?
disorder. That is you are not born with the bones being damaged. You are born with the. If you become damaged, your bones crustify.
Okay.
Oh, Crusty Bones.
So, but that's the official name of the disease, right? Crusty bone?
Is Crusty Bones.
FOP, absolutely.
FOP Crusty Bones.
All of those diseases have CFRs
That's
of,
my
of
new
around
nom de plume.
100%.
That's you want to be known as Crusty Bone?
Oh, Crusty Bones.
Oh, Crusty Bones.
OL apostrophe Crusty Bones. That's my new rapper name. Oh, Crusty Bones. Yeah.
Reaper M. Jones is giving way to
To
old Crusty Bones.
Reaper Jones is dead. Old Crusty
Long
Bones
live
is
old
alive.
Crusty Bones.
Well, that's right. Viva la old Crusty
His bones
Bones.
crustified.
Yeah, they did.
Some other well-known diseases, such as Ebola.
Yeah, I
Specifically,
have that
specifically
right now.
the Zebov strain, named after Zaire.
The Zebop. It's
The-
actually
Ebola
named
was
after
the
the
river.
Cyndi Lauper song.
Ebola
Zebop.
was the river where this was discovered. around.
Zebop a doobop.
Has a CFR of about 83 to 93%.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty
And
bad.
So if you
Perhaps.
get it, you're
You're unlikely, but not impossible.
But I'm unlikely to come into contact with someone who
That
has
is correct.
Ebola.
That is
I'm
why-
unlikely to get bitten by a shark, but it could happen.
That is why these don't just scare me, even though they are
It might.
horrifying in terms of if you get them, what happens. I mean, Ebola is a hemorrhagic fever, like the Marburg. I don't know if you ever heard of Marburg or not. Essentially, you lose everything on the inside, like blood.
Yeah.
You empty yourself out to your pores.
It all liquefies.
Yeah.
You melt. You ooze.
Not exactly, but yeah.
You're an oozing human being.
Anthrax, specifically the pulmonary form, which means if it's absorbed into your bloodstream, is a CFR about 85%.
You know, anthrax seems to have been a problem for so long. What are they working on curing this,
Well,
or
but-
coming up with something?
Is anthrax something you can catch in nature, or do you have to be poisoned with it? Because
It's airborne. It's airborne. isn't it?
mostly, most cases of anthrax that I've heard of is cows having anthrax.
Right.
Anthrax,
Bovine
and the only humans
anthrax.
I've ever heard of having anthrax were poisoned with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there any other way to get anthrax other than being poisoned with it?
Not that I'm aware of.
And it's airborne, right?
It's a
through the
bacteria.
dust. Yeah.
But it has to be made in a way
the
so that it can be,
Bacillus
so that you can poison a human being with it. Because in its natural, you don't catch anthrax from the cows that have anthrax.
Right.
I don't.
My favorite disease is bucolic. Bucolic is nice and rustic. It's a nice rustic
Right.
disease. Bucolic. That's my favorite.
Melancholy.
I have
As
melancholy.
spoken
Right.
from Old Crusty Bones.
Oh, Crusty Bones and his bucolic
But again,
daydream.
Those are not
Yes.
the focus of today's podcast.
That's my album.
I would look at diseases that have taken the greatest tolls on humanity.
Thank you, everybody. Good
The
night.
Black
What?
Death and the 1918 flu pandemic.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I had the Black Death. I
Which
was
way
the
are we
Black
killing
Death.
people first,
The
Jared?
bubonic plague.
Excellent.
Okay.
The Black Death, also known as the Great Plague, the Black Plague.
Which wiped out half of Europe,
The
right?
plague
Caught
was
from
one of the most
fleas on rats,
devastating
right?
pandemics
Fleas on rats?
in human history, resulting in the deaths of an estimated 75 to 200 million people
God
in
dang.
Eurasia, and peaking in Europe from 1347 to 1351.
Didn't you once ask us what if the bubonic plague had not occurred?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we decided it would be an overpopulated.
Oh,
it's a
something-
horrible
my
thing.
thing is
It's
something
a
else would
horrible
kill
thing.
people.
Right.
Yeah, that's what Jared said.
Right.
Yeah.
Something else would have killed
Because
us.
nature has a way of
200 million people.
Or war.
pruning
War could do
pruning
it
the
too.
trees, if you will.
Famine,
yeah, war could do
war,
it.
or a pestilence like this one.
Yeah.
The bacterium Yersinia pestis, which results in several forms of the plague, is believed to have been the cause of the bubonic plague, Black Death. The plague created a series of religious, social, and economic upheavals, which had profound effects on the course of European history. The plague arrived in Europe in October 1347 when, reportedly, 12 ships from the Black Sea docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. People gathered on the docks were met with a horrifying surprise. Most sailors aboard the ships were dead, and those still alive were gravely ill and covered in black boils that oozed blood and pus.
Yeah.
Sicilian authorities hastily ordered the fleet of death ships out of the harbor, but it was too late. Over the next 5 years, the Black Death would kill more than 20 million people in Europe, almost one-third of the continent's population.
Good God.
Even before the death ships pulled into the port of Messina, many Europeans had heard rumors about a great pestilence that was carving a deadly path across the trade routes like the Silk Road of the Near and Far East.
Yeah.
Indeed, in the early 1340s, the disease had struck China, India, Persia, Syria, and Egypt. I'm going to skip some stuff because we don't have a lot of time.
You better. You got 22 pages there. That's a doctorate.
The Italian poet Giovanni Boccaccio, because that's a fun name, wrote, at the beginning of the malady, certain swellings, either on the groin or under the armpits, waxed to the bigness of a common apple.
Oh!
Others to the size of an egg, some more, some less, and these the vulgar named plague boils.
Oh, and imagine it's a horrible disease, but I'm imagining the pressure that would put on other nerves having a growth like that, and it would just be unbearable.
Yeah.
Blood and pus seeped out of these strange swellings, which were followed by a host of other unpleasant symptoms: fever, chills, vomiting, diarrhea, terrible aches and pains, and then, quickly, death.
And then a spider exodus, right? That spiders would crawl out of a little hole like tiny spiders.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Medical knowledge was not great during the Middle Ages.
I saw that episode.
I can see what you learned in med
your
school.
oncology.
I learned everything.
All the stuff. I learned all the stuff.
I'm Dr. Krusty Bones.
The most
Dr. Old Crusty Bones.
authoritative account at the time came from medical
Or is it
faculty
old
in
Dr.
Paris.
Crusty Bones?
Old Dr. Krusty
In a report
Bones.
to the King of France that
I like how
blamed-
Jared just keeps going as if we're not
I
talking
don't have
at all.
time.
Right.
That blamed the heavens.
I have 23
Jared can
pages
feel
left,
my
ladies
pain.
and gentlemen.
Jared can feel my
We
pain
did
at
a
this
lot better
point.
to you since you had talked to us.
We
Yes,
have.
that's true. I did
Been
have.
nicer.
I did have a
They
conversation.
reported a conjunction of
We were
three
shamed.
planets. You're going to like this part. What the scientists actually thought was happening.
Okay.
They blamed the heavens. They reported a conjunction of three planets in 1345 that caused a great pestilence in the air.
Well, that did it. Yeah.
This report
That's
became the
exactly what
first
did it.
of a widely circulated series of plague tracts that sought to give advice to sufferers.
Oh, it's
That
the third horseman.
Yeah. That the plague was caused by bad air became the most widely accepted theory. This became known as the miasma theory. The word plague had no significance at the time, and only the recurrence of outbreaks during the Middle Ages gave it the name that has become the medical term.
I had a cousin that
Cousin.
died.
Cousin. His cousin.
My cousin. We got married.
We're on page 7, just so you're
I have. Oh my God. I have a cousin that died from.
A cousin? Who died from the plague?
Who died? No,
The
it was
importance
miasma.
Of, the
He
importance
died
of
from
hygiene
miasma.
was recognized only in the 19th century, 1800s, 500 years later.
This is a serious question.
Okay.
How much of the plague at this point was caused from human to human interaction, and how much of it was the fleas from the rats?
Fleas.
It
on the
started that way, but then it became humans.
Because it had to mutate it into a
Because
form
of
that could be
overcrowding.
that could transmit from human to human.
See,
'Cause
I
at
always
first
thought it
you
was
had
always the fleas on the rats that kept.
Well,
Well,
here's the thing about the fleas and the rats. It's not the fleas that cause the disease; it's the bacteria.
right that
Yeah.
they carry.
Well,
So
the
once
rat,
the
they get it
bacteria
from the
was
rats and
there-
carry it to the humans.
And there are,
right?
well, and then now there are fleas on the humans. Now the humans aren't their primary hosts. We'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But they could become a secondary
Okay.
host. But again, no hygiene. So until the 1800s, it is common that the streets are filthy with live animals of all sorts around and human parasites abounding, and that makes this disease spread easily. The dominant explanation now for the Black Death is the plague theory, which attributes the outbreak to this bacteria, Yersinia pestis, also responsible for an epidemic that began in southern China in 1865. This isn't the only potential explanation. There are others, but this is the most widely accepted one.
Yeah.
The mechanism for the bacteria spreading was believed to be transmitted, was discovered by a scientist named Paul Louis Simon, and was found to involve the bites of fleas whose midguts had become obstructed by replicating bacteria several days after feeding on an infected host. This blockage results in starvation and aggressive feeding behavior by the fleas, who attempt to clear their blockage by regurgitation, causing in more of the bacteria coming up.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's hard to think of a flea with a inner
With a
tract,
digestive problem.
but
yeah.
I guess I would have
How small they are, yeah.
It
They
makes
have
sense,
something.
but yeah, they're so tiny, you don't consider that.
Okay. In 1984, Zoologist Graham Twigg produced the first major work to...
Wait, Graham Twigg?
Graham Twigg?
Graham Twigg.
Graham
That's his name.
Twigg.
Absolutely.
Those are my favorite desserts. The
Graham
Graham
Twigs.
Twigs. Yeah.
He became the first to challenge this idea.
They're
of the
thin
bubonic plague
cookies.
theory.
Right.
And his doubts have been taken up by others. A variety of alternatives to the Yersinia pestis bacterium has been put forward. Twigg suggested the cause was a form of anthrax, and Norman Cantor thought it may have been anthrax and other pandemics. Some have argued it was an infectious disease, such as the hemorrhagic plague like Ebola, and some just argue there's insufficient evidence of the extinction of a large number of rats, because you think rats would be dying too.
Right.
So, but these theories have been supported by some research, but they're not widely accepted. Most people still believe that Yersinia pestis, this bacterium, is what causes it. There are no exact figures for the death toll of the plague because there just aren't records.
Yeah.
They're
The rate
burning
varied
the bodies
widely
there,
by
right?
locality. In urban centers, the greater the population before the outbreak, the longer the duration of the period of abnormal mortality.
Sure.
It killed some 75 to 200 million people in Eurasia.
I can't even imagine that number.
Now,
Now, there are some projections. I told you one-third higher. Some projections are higher. According to the medieval historian Philip Dayleader, in 2007,
Yeah, we'll take it.
the trend of recent research is pointing to a figure more like 45 to 50% of the European population dying during a 4-year period.
that's what I heard.
There is a
4
fair
years.
amount of geographic variation. In Mediterranean Europe, areas such as Italy, the south of France, and Spain, where plague ran for 4 years consecutively, it was probably closer to 75 to 80%. So, localized.
Can you imagine?
In Germany and England, it was probably closer to 20%. A death rate as high as 60% in Europe has been suggested by Norwegian historian Ole Benedictau.
Oh, well.
Old Benedictau,
Old Benedictau.
Yep.
he created the cucumber spread.
Now-
You didn't know that about him. He created that recipe.
Now, maybe this is coming up in your report.
Unlikely.
Okay.
I've been skipping a lot.
Are there people who are immune to the plague who just can't
not
catch
that
it?
we've found.
Or
I have
are-
not found that.
Or did the people who survived just not catch it, or they managed to overcome it?
My guess is they did not catch it. But there probably were some people who were immune, but they didn't have any sort of way in the time of figuring out why.
Well, the thing is, how could you avoid it, though? How could, I mean, your
Avoiding
body...
people who were
you would
infected.
have to
you'd-
almost be immune to it because you couldn't avoid the people that were infected with it.
Well, if you lived out in the woods in your own farm and didn't come into contact
That's
with people
true,
for
but
4
there's got to be
years.
somebody that lived in a civilized area that didn't catch
The most
it.
widely accepted estimate for the Middle East, including Iraq, Iran, and Syria during this time, is a death rate of about a third. The Black Death killed about 40% of Egypt's population. Half of Paris's population of 100,000 people died. In Italy, the population of Florence was reduced from 110 to 120,000 down to about 50,000 in about 13 years. At least 60% of the population of Hamburg and Bremen perished, and a similar percentage of Londoners may have died from the disease as well. In London, approximately 62,000 people died between the years of 1346 and 1353. Before 1350, there were about 170,000 settlements in Germany, and this was reduced by nearly 40,000 by 1450. In 1348, the plague spread so rapidly that before any physicians or government authorities had time to reflect upon its origins, about a third of the European population had already perished. In crowded cities, it was not uncommon for as much as 50% of the population to die. The disease bypassed some areas, and more isolated areas were less vulnerable to contagion. Monks and priests were especially hard hit since they cared for the victims.
Right.
So coming into contact. I'm going to skip some of these things. The plague recurred in late 1340s in the Mediterranean. In 1800s in China, it showed up again. There were 12 plague outbreaks in Australia from 1900 to 1925. The first North American plague epidemic was the San Francisco plague of 1900-1904 and then 1907-1908.
Oh, unaware.
Oh,
Modern
I didn't know.
treatments include these. They were trying to treat it with insecticides, at the use of antibiotics and a plague vaccine.
Yeah.
The plague bacterium could develop drug resistance. One case of a drug-resistant form was found in Madagascar in 1995.
Wow.
A further outbreak was reported in 2014 in Madagascar.
Well, I'll be damned.
In October 2017, the deadliest outbreak of the plague in modern times hit Madagascar, killing 170 people and infecting thousands. So then, CFR was much lower.
Yeah.
It affected thousands, only 170 died. Between 1900 and 2015, the United States had 1,036 human plague cases with an average of 9 cases per year. In 2015, 16 people in the western United States developed plague, including 2 cases in Yosemite National Park.
Where are these people catching the plague in the United
Well,
States?
that's what I'm
The
curious
bacteria.
about.
It's just around?
Something is, it's still around, but again, it's treatable now.
That's what surprises
No
me,
one
though,
has
is that
died.
there's no widespread outbreak, although the disease still exists
Yep.
in a form.
Because they're getting treated. They're getting they realize they've got it. They get treated. They don't pass it on to anybody else.
But how does I think it's just a non-understanding of bacteria existing without
these cases usually occur
anyone.
in rural northern New Mexico, northern Arizona, southern Colorado, California, southern Oregon, far western Nevada. So more isolated areas.
Yeah.
In June 2018, a child was confirmed, I saw newspaper articles about this, to be the first person in Idaho to be infected by the bubonic plague in nearly 30 years. This was just last month.
Well, the reason it had never been to Idaho is because
No one goes to Idaho.
Idaho doesn't take that kind of shit.
It's fair.
Yeah, they won't have it.
There are several classes of antibiotics that are effective in treating it. Mortality associated with treated cases of bubonic plague is about 1 to 15%.
Wow.
As opposed to 40 to 60% of untreated cases. Moving on, because don't have time. The Spanish flu. The Spanish flu...
Which is my favorite dance.
Yeah. Occurred in January of 1918 to December of 1920, so a very short period of time.
Yeah.
It was also known as the 1918 flu pandemic, was an unusually deadly influenza pandemic, the first of two involving H1N1. You may have heard those.
Oh, yes.
It infected 500 million people around the world, including people on remote Pacific islands and in the Arctic.
In the Arctic?
Mm-hmm. And resulted in the deaths of 50 to 100 million people.
Yeah.
3 to 5% of the world's population.
I had heard nothing about this.
Making it one of the deadliest
All
natural disasters
joking
in
aside.
human history.
Yeah.
It was
Far
first
more people
observed
than
in
died in World War
yeah.
II, which just preceded it.
Yeah. Wow.
World War One.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I misspoke.
I knew what you meant.
I misspoke.
The 1918 flu was first observed in Europe, the United States, and parts of Asia before swiftly spreading around the world. I found a couple that thought it started in Kansas. At the
Because
time,
everything starts in
there were no
Kansas.
effective drugs or vaccines to treat this killer flu strain. The flu attacks the respiratory system.
Right.
Very, very contagious. The infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks, and respiratory droplets are generated. When you breathe out, water comes out of your mouth.
Right.
And that can contain these droplets. So even just talking and breathing can spread it.
Right.
And then it can be inhaled by anyone nearby. Or a person who touches something with a virus on it and then touches your mouth or eyes or nose can become infected. Flu outbreaks happen every year, and we constantly have to update because flu viruses rapidly mutate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In our country, flu season generally runs from late fall into spring. In a general year, 200,000 Americans are hospitalized for flu. Not necessarily deadly flu, if it's not
Right.
treated,
Just the flu.
but the flu. Over the past 3 decades, there have been some 3,000 to 49,000 flu-related U.S. deaths annually.
That's surprising to me. But
Well, if you're elderly or
I
if
was
you're
gonna say,
young
there's
or
also
if
been a
you're not,
decrease
if you're in
in-
bad health to start
That's
out
what's
with.
so unique about this Spanish flu. A flu pandemic occurs when the especially virulent new flu strain with no immunity.
yeah.
The first wave of the 1918 pandemic occurred in spring and was generally mild. The sick who experienced typical flu symptoms such as chills and fever and fatigue usually recovered after several days, and the number of reported deaths was low. However, a second, highly contagious wave of influenza appeared with a vengeance in that fall. Victims died within hours or days of developing symptoms.
Hours.
Their skin turning blue and their
Wow.
lungs filling with fluid, so they were suffocating to death.
Yeah.
In just 1 year, in 1918, the average life expectancy in America plummeted by 12 years.
Oh, my God.
Gee.
It is unknown where this came from. However, it was first observed in Europe, America, and Asia, and then spread. Did I not write that down? I guess I didn't do it. But what I was going to say earlier is, what was so unusual is flus typically affect the elderly and the very young,
Right.
weak immune systems. But this one did the exact opposite. It was young adults, late 20s was the most
People
hard
with
hit.
strong
Yeah,
immune
you'd
systems
think
normally.
would be resistant. But that was the ones that were most likely targeted.
Is there a reason why?
Oh, here we go. No, I did actually write it down.
Okay.
No, we did not know, including a World War I serviceman. In fact, we mentioned earlier, more U.S. soldiers died from the 1918 flu that were killed in battle during the entirety of World War I. 40% of the U.S. Navy was hit with the flu, while 36% of the Army became ill. And troops were moving around the world in crowded ships and trains,
Right.
helping spread the virus. When the 1918 flu hit, doctors and scientists were unsure what caused it or how to treat it. Unlike today, there were no effective vaccines or antivirals, drugs that helped treat the flu.
Yeah.
Complicating matters was the fact that World War I had left parts of America with a shortage of physicians and other health workers. And of the available medical personnel in the U.S., many came down with the flu because they were
Well, of
trying to
course,
help others.
they were.
Additionally,
Yeah.
hospitals in some areas were so overloaded with patients that schools, private homes, and other buildings were converted into makeshift hospitals, some of which were staffed by medical students.
It really does sound like The Stand, doesn't it? Where they have
Yeah.
so many cases that they had to treat it in a weird way, you couldn't reach the hospital anyway.
Officials in some communities imposed quarantines. So, towns were imposing quarantines, martial law almost.
Sure.
Ordered citizens to wear masks and shut down public places, including schools, churches, and theaters. People were advised to avoid shaking hands and to stay indoors. Libraries put a halt on lending books, and regulations were passed banning spitting. According to the New York Times, during the pandemic, Boy Scouts in New York City approached people they'd seen spitting on the street and gave them cards that read, "You are in violation of the sanitary code." The flu took a heavy human toll, wiping out entire families and leaving countless widows and orphans in its wake. Funeral parlors were overwhelmed and bodies piled up. Many people had to dig graves for their own family members.
Wow.
Businesses were affected because people couldn't come into work. Food was affected because farmers couldn't harvest crops. And this just made health even worse around.
Right.
By the summer of 1919, the flu pandemic had come to an end as those who were infected either died or developed immunity. Almost 90 years later, in 2008, researchers announced they discovered what made the 1918 flu so deadly. A group of 3 genes enabled the virus to weaken a victim's bronchial tubes and lungs to clear away for the bacterial. So it actually weakened your lungs. You couldn't breathe, so that the bacteria could spread. Since 1918, there have been several other influenza pandemics, although none as deadly. A flu pandemic from 1957 to 1958 killed about 2 million people worldwide, including 70,000 in the United States. And a pandemic in the late 60s killed approximately 1 million, including 34,000 Americans. More than 12,000 Americans perished during the H1N1, or swine flu, that occurred from 2009 to 2010.
And by this time, the sensationalism of disease, there's one per year that's going to kill you.
But if you listen closely to the numbers that Jared was saying, each of these pandemics, there's fewer and fewer people. Even though it sounds like a lot of people, it's a lot. It's a lot fewer than the one that preceded it, which meant that
our population has increased.
Right. Our response to flu epidemics has
encouraging.
Improved.
Yeah. And I do want to have some encouraging things. So I've got a couple short stories that are encouraging about disease.
Okay.
The first one, do you guys know who Jon Snow is?
No.
I've heard the name, but that's from the Game of Thrones.
Exactly. So there are listeners who are shouting Game of Thrones at you right now. But Jon Snow, John, was an English physician in the early 1800s, a leader in the adoption of anesthesia and medical hygiene.
Good on him.
He is considered one of the fathers of modern epidemiology, in part because of his work tracing the source of a cholera outbreak in Soho, London in 1854. His findings inspired fundamental changes in water and waste systems of London, which led to similar changes in other cities and a significant improvement in general public health around the world. I've got stories here about he was the first who studied and calculated dosages for the use of ether and chloroform as surgical anesthetics. Some people had been using chloroform and killing people accidentally.
Yeah.
But he was one of the ones who refined it and developed anesthesia so people didn't have to have surgery while awake.
That's nice.
Now, if they're killing people with chloroform, is that essentially suffocating them? They're not able to get enough oxygen?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Body. He designed the apparatus to safely administer ether to patients and designed a mask to administer chloroform. So
I've seen those masks.
He personally administered chloroform to Queen Victoria when she gave birth to the last two of her 9 children, leading to a wider public acceptance of obstetric anesthesia.
Sure.
In 1854, there was a cholera outbreak, often called the Broad Street cholera outbreak, that occurred in the Soho district of London, England, and then occurred during the 1852 to 1860 cholera pandemic happening worldwide.
Yeah.
It killed approximately 616 people in London.
And if you remember, one of the guys at the gas station that Stu Redmond was at mentioned a cholera outbreak that had happened a few years before, that he was thinking it must be cholera again when Captain Tripp started going out. It's funny the tiny things you remember from things you read 30 years ago.
So there were 2 competing theories as to what was causing cholera. I actually mentioned one of them to you earlier, the miasma theory.
Yeah.
That is that cholera was caused by particles in the air, or miasmata, which arose from decomposing matter or other dirty organic sources. And you understand why people would think this.
Sure.
There's filth everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that these miasma particles were traveling through the air, infecting individuals, and causing cholera. Dr. William Farr, the commissioner for the 1851 London census, and a member of the General Register's office, believed that miasma arose from the soil surrounding the River Thames. It contained decaying organic matter because people were dumping their stuff in the Thames.
Right.
And was released into the London air. So cleansing and scouring is what will take care of you. However, there was also this development of what's called the germ theory. Snow was a skeptic of this miasma theory and stated that diseases such as cholera and bubonic plague were caused by pollution. Were not caused by this. So he didn't understand the mechanism exactly. But by talking to local residents of this area where people are getting sick, and with the help of a reverend, he identified the source of an outbreak. And the way he did it was incredible. He just went around and found where the people who were sick lived.
Well.
And he developed a map.
Yeah.
And it was so clear when looking at the map that it centered around one area.
Right.
He created a map of the area of London that detailed the homes of everyone who had contracted cholera. And you can look at it now and see that the outbreak is centered around a local watering hole, a well. Everyone who got the disease, and people who were further away, some of them got their water there because they didn't like the local well, and a lot of the kids who were further away went to school around the area. So you
Yeah,
can
so
tell.
they were getting exposed
And
to that
that's
water.
what epidemiology is. It's tracing an infection. He invented it by just finding out who is sick.
Smart. It's
Wow.
clever.
Nice.
Yep. Although his chemical and microscope examinations did not conclusively prove its danger, his studies of the pattern were convincing enough to persuade the local council to disable the well pump. Snow's study was a major event in the history of public health and geography. It is regarded as the founding event in the science of epidemiology, which has saved countless lives. And Snow wrote himself, "On proceeding to the spot, I found that nearly all the deaths had taken place within a short distance of the pump. There were only 10 deaths in houses situated decidedly nearer to another street pump. In 5 of these cases, the families informed me that they always used the pump on Broad Street. In other cases, deceased children went to school near the pump. With regards to the deaths occurring in the locality belonging to the pump, there were 61 instances in which I was informed that the deceased persons used to drink the water, either constantly or occasionally. The result of this inquiry, then, is there has been no particular outbreak or prevalence of cholera in the part of London except among the persons who were in the habit of drinking water from this well." So everyone in the science community is convinced it's bad air, and he realizes this, that it has to
Right,
be
it's
the
the
water.
bad water.
Researchers later discovered that this public well had been dug only 3 feet from an old cesspit,
Yeah, there you go.
Of course.
which had begun to
Of
leak
course.
fecal bacteria into the well,
God.
and a cloth diaper of a baby who'd contracted cholera had been tossed into that cesspit.
Yeah.
So the
Oh my
baby
God.
feces going
Right.
into the well.
Ugh.
Unfortunately, after the cholera epidemic had subsided, governments replaced the pump handle. They had responded only to the urgent threat posed to the populations, and afterwards they rejected Snow's theory. To accept his proposal would have meant indirectly
Of course, the
accepting...
government actually denying something that
here's
an
why.
educated person...
Here's why.
Okay.
They did not accept the fecal-oral route of disease transmission.
They're in denial.
It was too disgusting to imagine.
Yeah.
Snow suffered a stroke while working in his office in London on June 10th, 1958, and died 6 days
Did you know that's like the number 3 cause of death?
It's actually number 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was
I heard
45 years
differently.
old. He was
I don't know.
45 years old.
I've heard it both ways.
I've heard it both ways.
In his lifetime, his work was never accepted. It wasn't until after his death that other scientists came to the realization that contaminated water is the source of cholera outbreaks.
Ain't that the way it always works?
Yep.
Who knows how many
That's
lives were
exactly how it
saved
is. You
due
figure
to
it
his
out
pioneering
50
work.
years later.
A plaque commemorates Snow, and he has so many commendations, and his 1854 study in the place of the water pump on Broad Street, now called Broadwick Street.
Yeah.
It shows a water pump with its handle removed. The spot where the pump stood is covered in red granite, to give him credit for all the lives that were saved because
Yeah.
of his work. All right, a second one. Again, we'll go quickly here.
Okay.
Jonas
You know
Salk.
what I love about Jon Snow is that he actually has a really good chance of sitting on the Iron Throne.
Yeah, winter
Yeah,
is coming.
he's going to get it.
Winter is coming.
I've never
Winter
seen,
has come.
I mean,
I've
death-
never
death
seen
didn't
Game
stop-
of
Winter
Thrones.
is here.
Okay.
I've never seen Game of
Death
Thrones,
didn't stop
but
in the
my
first
money
one,
is
right?
on
That's
him.
right.
I've got a bookie. I was like, "Hey, bookie, Jon Snow. What are the
right.
odds?" He's like
We're
3
gonna
to
blow
1.
through
I
this.
said,
We're gonna
"Lay
blow
me down
through
for $100."
Jared's trying to get on.
I
with
know.
stuff.
I wanted to have a discussion at the end about
We're
something
gonna
else. We'll see if we can have
behave.
time for
Okay.
it. Until
Salk.
1955,
he discovered
polio was
penicillin?
considered no. that's-
polio.
yeah.
Jonas Salk.
Yeah,
because
yeah. Salk.
We talked about this during
Fleming,
Annie.
Alexander Fleming is
Yeah.
the one who came up with the
Okay.
discovered penicillin. Polio was considered one of the most until 1955. Polio was considered one of the most frightening public health problems in the world. In the post-war United States, annual epidemics were increasingly devastating.
Yeah.
The 1952 epidemic was the worst outbreak in the nation's history. Of nearly 58,000 cases reported that year, 3,145 people died, and 21,269 were left with mild to disabling paralysis, with
Yeah.
most of its victims being children.
Or the president.
The public reaction was to a plague, said historian William L. O'Neill. Citizens of urban areas were to be terrified every summer when this frightful visitor returned. According to a 2009 PBS documentary, apart from the atomic bomb, America's greatest fear was polio. As a result, scientists were in a frantic race to find a way to prevent or cure the disease. In 1938, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the world's most recognized victim of the disease, had founded the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, now known as the March of Dimes Foundation since 2007, an organization that would fund the development of vaccine. And listen to this group they put together to see what scientists can do when they're funded and
Yeah.
respected. In 1947, Jonas Salk accepted an appointment to the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. In 1948, he undertook a project funded by the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis to determine the number of different types of poliovirus. Salk saw an opportunity to extend this project towards developing a vaccine against polio, because we had vaccines for other diseases
Yeah.
before this. And together with the skilled research team he assembled, devoted himself to the work for the next 7 years. The field trial set up to test the Salk vaccine was, according to O'Neill, the most elaborate program of its kind in history, involving 20,000 physicians and public health officers, 64,000 school personnel, and 220,000 volunteers. Over 1,800,000 school children took part in the trial. When news of the vaccine's success was made public on April 12, 1955, Salk was hailed as a miracle worker, and the day almost became a national holiday. Around the world, an immediate rush to vaccinate began, with countries including Canada, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, West Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Belgium planning to begin polio immunization campaigns using his vaccine. Salk campaigned for mandatory vaccination, claiming that public health should be considered a moral commitment. His sole focus had been to develop a safe and effective vaccine as rapidly as possible, with no interest in personal profit. When asked who owned the patent to it, Salk said, "Well, the people, I would say. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?"
I remember hearing this recently, and it may have been on this podcast, that exact quote.
I've not said it before. I discovered it while researching him.
It must have been Jeff then.
It wasn't me.
It must have been me.
In 1960,
Yeah, it
he
was
founded the
definitely me.
Salk Institute for Biological Studies in La Jolla, California, which is today a center for medical and scientific research.
La Jolla.
La Jolla?
La Jolla.
It is La Jolla.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
terrible. Salk's last years were spent searching for a vaccine against HIV before he passed away. In 1977, Salk was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Jimmy Carter, with the following statement accompanying the medal. "Because of Dr. Jonas E. Salk, our country is free from the cruel epidemics of poliomyelitis that once struck almost yearly. Because of his tireless work, untold hundreds of thousands who might have been crippled are sound in body today. These are Dr. Salk's true honors, and there is no way to add to them. This Medal of Freedom can only express our gratitude and our deepest thanks." And again, he wasn't the only one who contributed to this.
Right. He won the Nobel Prize, didn't he, Jonas Salk?
Do not have that information.
I thought he did. I could be wrong. I certainly could be wrong.
So now we're veering away. I want to tell the stories because
you could be wrong.
I wanted to talk a
No,
bit
not
about.
actually.
We talked about disease the whole time, but I want to talk
Yeah.
about sometimes humans have won. Now we are
Yeah.
improving.
Yeah.
Knowledge saves lives. Vaccines save lives, and this is why I, Jared, personally find this anti-vax movement so disturbing.
Oh, it's horrifying.
So let's talk for a moment about the anti-vax movement.
Let's do it.
In 1998, when a UK physician named Andrew Wakefield published a paper in The Lancet that claimed he found a correlation between autism, a neurodevelopmental disorder, gastrointestinal diseases, and infection with the measles virus. And this is when this anti-vax movement began.
Right.
It got its footing. The paper did not directly implicate vaccines. However, in subsequent press conferences and media contacts, Wakefield he specifically spread concerns about the MMR vaccine being linked to this gastrointestinal autism disorder condition.
Okay. You cannot catch autism. You're born with autism.
Right.
It's a mutation in your DNA or your genes. You cannot catch it. It manifests itself around 2 years old
Yeah.
when you're taking these vaccines.
Yeah.
But the vaccines ain't causing autism.
Yeah,
Well, there's that false
want to
equivalency
give-
that comes from that. This must mean this. When
Well, it's a desperation.
there's an
in
X
parents.
factor that they're
they
not
want to
thinking
be
about.
blameless. They don't. They
Right.
feel like they've done something to their child.
Right.
And they're desperate for an easy to understand solution. And if we can solve this problem, other kids won't have to go through what I go through. So I understand
Right.
why, but I want to give the explanation.
Right.
Here is the background. In the UK, vaccination rates with this MMR vaccine dropped from about 92% in 1996 down to as low as 84% in
Oh
2002.
no. That's
In
why
some
we
parts
have
of
measles
London,
and smallpox
compliance
coming back
rates
right
were
now.
as smallpox is eradicated.
Is it done?
Smallpox has been eradicated, yeah.
Okay.
But measles and mumps, and those are coming back. In some parts of London, compliance rates were as low as 61% in 2003. This is a dramatic decrease in the number of people willing to take the MMR vaccine or give it to their children. All because of the study and his talking.
Yeah.
These rates are low enough that they are below what we call herd immunity. That's the magic number of people who are vaccinated, around 90%, that prevents endemic spread of an infection. AKA, imagine if Jeff can't get the vaccine.
Yeah.
He's immunocompromised. His body could not handle vaccine, or he has egg allergies.
Yeah.
He can't get a vaccine. If you and I are vaccinated, we don't get it, and we can't spread it to him.
Right.
That's what herd immunity is.
Yeah.
Enough people are vaccinated that people aren't going to get this disease. It's going to go away.
Yeah.
But when these rates start to drop, because parents are keeping this from their children, now their children can get it.
Right.
And someone like, again, air quotes, Jeff is my example here, could
Right.
get it because other people aren't taking precautions.
Yeah.
Did they when people stopped vaccinating their children, has there been any study on whether that affected the percentage of children who were showing up with autism every year?
Oh, we'll get to that in a moment. The answer is absolutely not. This subsequently led to
Well, I knew
outbreaks.
the answer.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if it's been studied.
This subsequently led to outbreaks of diseases that
Yeah.
had previously
Just
been
not-
removed.
Just not
such as
published
measles.
as much as it should.
A similar thing happened shortly after that in the United States. The rates dropped to vaccination, particularly in certain populations, and those populations became susceptible to previously eliminated diseases.
Yep.
Let's talk about Wakefield for a moment.
All right.
He was later found to have undisclosed conflicts of interest. He was actually applying for a patent for a replacement measles vaccine.
Interesting.
He was also being funded by lawyers who were engaged in lawsuits on behalf of parents who were claiming their child's autism were caused by the MMR vaccine.
Why would your funding cause your conclusions
Crazy,
to be
right?
Even
different?
later, there were allegations made that the data in his original Lancet report, some of it anyway, may have been faked because it didn't square with the hospital records when they were re-reviewed.
I've read this
Where have
recently.
we talked about fake data?
Faked records.
Yeah.
So this is why this is so disturbing to me. This entire movement came
It's
from
built on
false
a lie.
data.
Yeah.
In
But it's been
2010,
repeated enough that more people think it's real than not, I think.
In
still to
2010,
this day.
based on those undisclosed conflicts of interest and these allegations, the Lancet withdrew his paper from the published record.
Thank
Wakefield
you.
was found guilty of professional misconduct in the UK and no longer had a license to practice medicine. However, the damage had been done.
Yeah.
Fears about a correlation between the MMR vaccine and autism were already spreading. A 2010 survey found that as many as 25% of U.S. parents think there is a link between vaccines and autism. In that same survey, 9 in 10 parents think that vaccines are important to the health of their children. This indicates confusion. They don't know
Sure.
who to trust. Because scientists, air quotes, are telling them these can be dangerous.
Right. Well, you don't want to trust someone who stands to benefit or perceived as
You think
benefiting
your doctors,
from this.
yeah,
Right.
big pharmaceuticals trying to get you.
Right, because they benefit from you being sick.
Yeah, there used to be scientists who were saying that smoking wasn't
Yeah.
bad for you. It wasn't
Right.
causing cancer.
Ultimately, the question
Who
of
was paying
vaccine
them, Philip
safety
Morris? Yeah.
isn't about the ethics or the research of one scientist. It's about scientific evidence. There have been a number of studies on whether there really is a connection between the MMR vaccine and autism or any other neurodevelopmental disorder. Huge studies. Not
Yeah.
just like one person talked to a couple people. Data from Poland, the UK, Denmark, Finland, Japan, United States, all independently found there is no connection whatsoever between the MMR vaccine and autism. In the years following Wakefield's paper, when research was progressively clearing the MMR vaccine's correlation with autism, those who were having fears shifted their fears from that vaccine to thimerosal, which is it's in some vaccines, but even though it was never in the MMR vaccine. It's a mercury-based preservative added mainly to multi-dose vials or inactivated vaccines to prevent bacterial contamination.
Yeah.
So it's just a chemical added to some vaccines, not the MMR one, but some
Right.
vaccines. It had been used for decades in many health and beauty products, not just vaccines. But now, people who realize we can't be mad at MMR anymore because there's no data, well, let's get this. It's got to be this now. Over the last decade, there have been multiple studies in multiple countries looking at any correlation between exposure to thimerosal and the risk of developing either autism specifically or any neurodevelopmental disorder in general. These studies have shown no correlation.
Well, I've
Because
heard,
you can't develop autism. It's not caused.
Well,
You're born with it. It's not caused by anything.
I had heard that there was a correlation studied between mercury content and
Yeah.
autism.
Now, mercury can be dangerous.
Mercury is not good for your body.
No, it's a poison.
It's not going to cause autism.
Right.
Most significantly
But
in the United States,
they struggled to find a
The government decided to remove thimerosal almost completely from the routine childhood vaccine schedule. That was completed at the beginning of 2002. Has autism stopped?
No.
The result, the cumulative dose
And it
children were
existed
exposed
before
to
they recognized it.
from the entire vaccine schedule has been dramatically decreased. Those who were most vociferous about a connection between thimerosal and autism predicted autism rates would plummet after the removal of thimerosal from the vaccine program. This did not happen.
Of course not.
In fact, autism continues to increase at the exact same rate. And it could be because of diagnosis.
Yeah, more
Was
people
it
are.
ever diagnosed?
People hid it for years
anything.
because it was an embarrassment, or they didn't
Right.
realize it was autism. It's the reporting has increased, not the number of cases.
Right.
Here's a quote I found I really like. Autism is caused by a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Risk factors include certain infections during pregnancy, such as rubella,
Yeah.
the R of the MMR vaccine.
Yeah.
Right.
If you get this disease, your
Right.
child could have autism.
Yeah.
As well as valproic acid, alcohol, or cocaine use during pregnancy.
Yeah.
There is strong evidence that autism arises very early in development, aka before the baby's born.
Right.
Yeah.
Parents may first become aware of autistic symptoms in their child around the time of routine vaccination.
Yeah, too.
This has led to unsupported theories blaming vaccine overload, a vaccine preservative, or the MMR vaccine for causing autism. Although these theories lack any convincing scientific evidence and are biologically implausible, parental concern about a potential vaccine link with autism has led to lower rates of childhood immunizations, outbreaks of previously controlled childhood diseases in some countries, and the preventable deaths of several children.
You know, I would think that you'd be more afraid of the disease that your child could actually catch from
Right.
not taking the vaccine that could actually kill it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would rather have a
Then-
child with autism than a dead child.
Right.
And it's not going to cause autism.
No.
You're either going to have a child with autism or
you're
not.
not. Right.
Yeah.
But
It's not
you
a
could
rare disease.
prevent the child, whether autism or not, from getting this disease.
And now we have
Yeah.
parents who are so afraid of doing the wrong thing that they choose inaction. So they choose not to let their child be vaccinated because they're afraid that if I act wrongly, it's my fault.
My advice to every parent is you're not going to get it right. Just do what you think
And
is
what I
best
always
as
tell my
far as
kids, because
that
I talk
goes.
about this a
Get
lot with my
vaccines.
students.
Get
Mine.
vaccine.
I talk
Do
to
the
kids-
common sense thing.
Imagine if you were afraid of your child being overweight, so you
Yeah.
starved them to death.
Right.
Imagine if you were afraid of your child getting bed bugs, so you left them in a cage.
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
You're afraid of something that's not going to happen, so you're
taking
you're
extreme
abusing
measures,
your child
extreme-
and putting other people at risk.
Right.
Now, there are there risks for vaccination? There are some risks. Polio has been caused by some vaccinations, but it is incredibly rare.
Yeah.
And again, there are
Right.
some children who have immunocompromised bodies who cannot be vaccinated.
Yeah.
There are precautions that you should take before vaccinating your child, but they are in no way connected to
But there
autism.
are fewer children who catch polio from the polio vaccine than would catch polio if there wasn't a vaccine.
Right.
Or that catch measles
Oh, yeah.
if they aren't vaccinated.
Yeah.
And children are dying from things like whooping cough, pertussis. And
Yeah,
if
I
you
heard
wa-
pertussis
If
made
you
a
watch
comeback
a child
recently.
with pertussis and you know that their parent didn't vaccinate them, I mean, because
Yeah.
the child is coughing, their face is turning blue, they can't breathe. Oh,
Right.
It is painful to watch. And I know this hasn't been the most uplifting episode, but I wanted to end with, we are winning this.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about cancer today. I didn't want to talk about cancer.
Right,
But I've
right.
talked here before about there is so much research being done. In the next 15, 20 years, it's going to be revolutionized. The way we treat cancer.
But here's the problem: because we've made such progress on diseases, but in the social arena with like the Great Society and the New Deal and all this stuff, people take it for granted, and it's easy for them to not realize what it was like before these things.
Yeah.
And so they don't understand that being against these things is really setting the stage for bad things to happen,
Right.
for these diseases to come back, because you've lived in a world where these diseases weren't a worry anymore because people were vaccinated, they weren't catching it.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for a lot of people, especially when you don't really have time to do all the study yourself. And depending on what your source of information is, and the internet is filled with all kinds of information, true and not.
People will tell you
and and so you can find someone
I know,
who will
for
tell you
idiots, it's
anything.
all the time.
And so
Yeah, but nobody listens.
so if you're inclined to worry about certain things, you can find someone who's going to stoke that
Oh, yeah.
fear,
Sure.
and
fear-mongering.
so you lose the capability to
make well-informed, rational decisions.
Exactly.
And I want to end this where I started, where I was talking about life expectancy. There are people who are afraid of aspartame.
Yeah.
And there are
The sweetener.
there are odd studies. Some are for it, some are against
It's
it.
a carcinogen.
Some will say that.
Some say that it's a
And
carcinogen.
again, I haven't
know.
found convincing evidence that it's the most dangerous thing on the planet. I just think it tastes bad. You'll
Yeah.
find people that talk
Yeah, I
about
don't like
canned
it.
foods and the preservatives in those
Right.
and how that's killing us.
And the mineral content
And
in the
insecticides
packaging. Right.
and all these things and vaccines, and they're getting vaccinated more. But again, life expectancy is increasing.
Right.
None of these things are killing us, they're making us live longer. Packaging and preserving foods means people who couldn't get food now can.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah.
not farming your own food, now you have access to food. And is fresh food better for you? Yeah, it's not bad. Like, it's a good thing to have
Yeah.
access to fresh food. It's a lot more expensive. But we are living longer, and that's why things like cancer are killing us, because you're not dying of the flu anymore.
Yeah. Right.
You're not dying of measles or mumps or polio.
Yeah.
You're surviving till old age, and now things like cancer because our body's breaking down,
Right.
heart disease because of things we're doing to our body,
Yeah.
and Alzheimer's because of our brain. Those are the fears. But the thing you should take away is medicine has improved so much. Like, we are in a time now.
Yeah, we're doing better.
Which time period do you want to live in now? Now I want to live in
Right.
now because I'm not
Right.
going to die of everything that's outside.
Yeah.
Well, I without modern medicine, I believe that 2 of the 3 of us would probably be dead already.
Yeah.
I guarantee one of us would.
Yeah. So sorry, but
You guys, I don't know about,
Yeah.
but one of us would be dead.
so that's the report on diseases that I want to talk about.
It was
And-
still more uplifting than our serial killer
That's-
episode.
I found the serial killer episode uplifting. It doesn't happen to everybody, so there you go. Everybody gets sick,
Yeah, and if you want to tell
And
us
everyone will die.
yeah,
and
if you
everyone
want to
will
tell
die.
us, dear
But
listeners,
not everybody gets killed by a serial killer.
about
It's
your
fluff.
bouts
It's
with
just
Captain
fluff.
Trips, your bouts with Captain Trips that you guys have had.
Oh God!
Your favorite colors?
Yeah.
Any diseases of interest or fears you have about certain diseases. If you'd like to know more, if you're sorry that I talked about disease at all because you're scared that you're going to get all the things now,
Right.
I apologize.
Sure. I already have them
Don't
all.
fear the crusty bone disease.
Don't
You're
fear
not
the
going to
Reaper.
get crusty bone.
No, not unless I will upon you.
Seasons
So
don't fear
watch
the
your
Reaper.
ass.
'Cause-
No.
'cause
Do the wind, the sun, or the rain.
Exactly.
Remember, Ron is no longer the treasure of Hardin County.
Nope.
He's old crusty bones.
I'm old crusty bones.
And on that note,
I'm going to get a jacket made.
until next time, stay wild.
Stay wild.
Bite the edge.